Happy to be here with another episode of The Breakup. The show is all about contrasting the relationships that go into making dollars with the relationships that go into making Bitcoin. So it's all about our relationship with money. And we like to compare and contrast fiat with Bitcoin and all the different things that can happen. And today's show might actually change your life. It might change your life. It's not just a little show about trading your relationship with dollars for Bitcoin. It might change your entire life, because we got an assist from our good friend Giacomo Zucco, an old Bitcoiner, who I think really has sort of mapped out the character and personality types of Bitcoin, because this show is all about the breakup. It's all about imagining that we are in this relationship with money, and the characterization of that relationship can actually be in a sort of microcosm, show the personas, let's say, that make the world go round. So we're going to compare those today. And because I did mention the world is coming at you fast and the future is here before you know it, it looks like, if you saw this weekend anyway, today's Monday, it looks like the video that was going all around was we have flying cars now. There's a flying car, the Tesla that flew into the sky. And but it did make me think. So it reminded me of something. I took responsibility, let's say, a few weeks ago for being wrong about a prediction on the show. I said Russia would not invade Ukraine. Now, the reason I did it, so I said no. And I right away when it happened, came on the show and I said, I got it wrong. However, the reason I got it wrong looks more and more right. I got it wrong because I predicted that Russia would get smashed, beaten, destroyed, that tanks and none of this stuff made sense anymore. And we made that prediction on this show before the invasion even took place. And the reason we said it is basically because of these flying vehicles, for lack of a better word. What we saw with the Tesla was really just, let's say, the proto versions. Forget the Tesla for a second. What we're seeing with the war is the proto version of flying cars, in the sense that it's just an engineering problem. The payload that these drones are taking, and these are not the drones that go up to space with rocket engines and all that. These are small drones with propellers that are able to shoot their targets down below and map them. So when I see that the capacity of the drone is getting better and better and better, the idea of flying cars now is not a science problem. It's not a science problem anymore. We don't have to invent something new in order to have flying cars. It's really just an engineering problem now. It's just an engineering problem. And we've seen in the history of war that it really can speed up the process of engineering, especially for commercial products. And we're going to talk a bit about that when we compare, let's say, the psychological engines behind fiat and behind Bitcoin and fiat today. But we've seen in wars before that you can really speed up the process of product development when it comes to these deadly machines. And so the prediction is, forget about the Tesla flying vehicle for a second, and forget about who's right or wrong about war. And we always have to remember there's real people dying, so we can't just be excited about the future. In this case, this is a sad story, what's going on over there, and it doesn't look like it's getting any better, and these things are being used for the worst things possible. However, we can see the pieces in place for these drones to actually start carrying peaceful missions and people and things. And it looks like a lot of that is not too far away. But the whole engineering piece brings me to, I think, the heart of the issue today. And so first of all, let's just take a look at this chart. So Giacomo Zucco, who gave me the inspiration for this today, is a fellow from Italy. I guess he lives in Switzerland now. I've known him for a long time. He was one of those people, even for me, when I joined the whole Bitcoin world years ago now, almost 10 years ago, there'd already been people who thought things through. You'd arrive to something and say, I'm the first person, 2013, 2014 to think about this. And then you read and you look on some forum somewhere or some chat room, and it had actually all been, kind of figured out or at least discussed. And this guy, Giacomo Zucco, is one of the people that was sort of all around this stuff. He was talking about, Austrian school and Bitcoin in the earliest days. He was talking about some of the scaling wars and optimizing from the engineering front. And this weekend in Las Vegas, he gave a long talk. It was about an hour long. I'll recommend it to all of you. But if you want the gist of it, what he did was he created this profile, something he said he's been working on for a while. And it's a little bit like the history of Bitcoin in a sense, but it shows, in this show, we think of money as a psychological engine. We don't care about the accounting. We don't care about the numbers. We don't care about the math. What we care about is there enough momentum, are enough people involved for it to go forward and perpetuate and to attract people and to attract interest, right? You want people to be interested. Interest is not only the amount of money paid on money to lend it out. It's also literally, are people interested in this thing? And what he decided was, or what he shared at that conference was, he's been working on it for years, but he'd sort of come up with this profile of the psychology of Bitcoin. I'll call it that. That's my word. That's not what he called it. But he put these profiles together to describe how Bitcoin grew and who's still behind it, perpetuating this psychological engine and perpetuating interest. So he started with this concept that revolutionaries, actually, he started with engineers, and I would agree. Historically, engineers overlapping with revolutionaries in this cypherpunk section here. So you might not be able to see this, but this is a hooded guy behind a laptop. I try to take the icon of a hacker, and do it. But it says cypherpunks here, and you've got a hooded guy behind a laptop here. So the cross section of engineers and revolutionaries were really the first class. They were the first class of Bitcoiners. They were the first ones to say, okay, this and that. I always said the first group to come next were the first non-sentimental group to get into Bitcoin. By non-sentimental, the revolutionaries had a mission, the engineers had a mission, but the speculators, the early Wall Street people, Chad Karskarilla from Paxos, right? This guy was just kind of laid off from the meltdown, and then his hedge fund wasn't that active and wasn't able to do a lot of stuff in New York City in 2011 with Occupy This and Wall Street and who knows what's going on and who's funding all this stuff. And so he literally, out of like a normal Wall Street thing, started mining Bitcoin. They would go to the buttonwood trees to trade it, where like in the early days of the stock exchange, there was a tree where people in New York would trade stocks under. And so this whole culture was there at the time, but these were the first non-sentimental people. So the speculators entered here. And he puts this disruptor piece down there. That's sort of the Silicon Valley people. That's the people with an elevator pitch. And he had a great joke. The people with an elevator pitch, and they give it to you in the elevator, but sometimes you want to get off. And I thought that was really funny. And so what he said was, if you combine these revolutionaries, the engineers, and the speculators, and you take all of the Venn diagrams and the overlap, in the middle you have what is really the Bitcoin psychology, the Bitcoin psychological engine. If you take these three pieces here, each of them working in concert, you sort of see where the momentum is coming from. People who want a better world, who are then able to not have to think too much about the money, let's say, or the protocol, or how P2P cash might work in an electronic environment. The engineers have figured it out. There is certainly the verify piece, but let's be honest, I can't check the work of core devs and I can't check the work of the Bitcoin system. I can certainly check my UTXOs and things like that, but I can't do much more than that. So in some cases, the ability to, let's say, take the mental load off of speculating and money and engineering money and communicating money goes away when you can trust the engineers in that way. So in this way, we start to see the whole piece. The speculators are a big part of it, because if there was no market for Bitcoin and other things, then Bitcoin would lose a lot of its interest, because people certainly would, number go up. What do you call them? You're caught between the number go up crowd and the, scale everything and go crazy. So what I ended up doing was saying, okay, this definitely makes sense for the psychology of Bitcoin. I certainly see what Giacomo is saying. And I compared it to Bretton Woods 2 and 3. The reason I compared it to Bretton Woods 2 and 3 is, and I'm arguing here that's already a fact, that Bretton Woods of just America is already, we're not going to be analyzing that one. We're only using Bretton Woods 2, which is the post-71 version of Bretton Woods, when the US dollar, not gold, not a dollar backed by gold, just the dollar is the primal currency in the market, and through which most markets are formed, including that of oil. So I'm saying here that's over. And there's already now two. I think that was always inevitable. I think, even with Ukraine and Russia, that people would have a demand for Chinese yuan was always going to happen. It's the biggest consumer market in the world. So I'm not going to chalk this up to a failure necessarily on the part of the US government, though there isn't many good things to say these days. But it seems like it was a natural progression anyway. And really why we were interested in Bitcoin from the start, because if the US dollar couldn't keep its hegemonic position in global finance, the Chinese dollar was coming, or the Chinese currency was coming. And so it's always been my belief that to avoid any of these countries, Bitcoin was absolutely necessary, because if it's not going to be the political, if it's not going to be the dollar, which somewhat resists being political, although that's completely false at this point. There was an idea 12 years ago that the dollar resisted being political. I don't think we're in that world anymore. If we didn't have the dollar, we would have an overtly political dollar run by the People's Bank of China. And that's where we were headed, right? Well, that's where we were headed. So Bitcoiners early on understood this and said, no political dollar, we're going to do it this way. I do want to mention, though, one of the amazing things before we even get into what's different about these two psychological engines. And it's about a little factoid about the history of America that a lot of people don't actually think about, even if they're American. And that is that while you see here that speculators are in both of these psychological engines, one difference is revolutionaries, where I've got the don't tread on me snake. And if you're not American and don't know what the don't tread on me snake, this was a big symbol of 1776. And if I did the drawing right, this was actually partitioned into 13 parts for the 13 colonies, each of them representing a piece of the snake that was going against the crown and Great Britain, and continues to be a symbol of anti-authority in America and revolutionary spirit. But here's the amazing part of America. All revolutions in history, all of them, excluding America, were done by those with everything to win and nothing to lose. The Russian Revolution, the Cuban Revolution, you can go through history and think of all these. There could be ones that I don't know. I obviously don't know everything about history, but when I look at all the revolutions we know about that changed things, that changed their order, it was generally by outsiders, generally done by people who really had nothing to lose. What was Castro? Castro just got out of jail before he went back to Cuba and did his thing. And that's sort of the case in a lot of countries. The United States of America is alone in that the elite of the time conducted the revolution. We've never seen that before or after, as far as I can tell, where someone like George Washington, in a patrician world based on more or less a feudal agricultural economy or a mixed agricultural economy, George Washington's one of the richest people in the world. He owned thousands of acres in Virginia, basically the best land. That's like owning thousands of acres in France. And that would have made him one of the most powerful, dukes in the world. And I believe many times he was offered king titles, everything in order to not do the war. Now, if he lost, it was over, right? He was done with. There was no one letting him keep his money or anything. And Jefferson and Ben Franklin's the same. Ben Franklin was a hero in England. He was a celebrity, an inventor. He was the original Steve Jobs. He would go over to England. He used to wear funny American clothing because Europeans expected it of him. They thought he was some wilderness guy. So he would wear the Davy Crockett hat and all this furs because they thought he was some guy in a canoe going around settling lands and all that stuff. And he would play to it because he knew it gave him persuasive power and he could manipulate all of these aristocrats with his abilities. And he was one of the original Americans. I think people have always credited him with being an original American in the line of Mark Twain or any one of these other fun people that America has produced over the years. So that whole piece there makes a big difference, that revolutionaries actually created America. And if I think about it, you could actually take this Bitcoin mental map away. You can take this psychological engine away, and you can make this America pre-Bretton Woods. Because America was founded by those revolutionaries, which makes it totally different than any other nation, as I said. This is not a revolution run by some illegitimate son or a claim to a throne or none of that stuff. It was a bunch of people saying, I got a better idea. I got a better idea than that. And your idea is actually not that bad. You've done so far so good, but we can do it even better. And that's what happened. So, and when we say engineers here, remember that early Americans had obviously complete freedom to do this stuff. And we saw the types of engineering marvels that happened with the use of the country expanding, and we saw the canals being dug and the bridges getting built and all these amazing things. And we can imagine that engineers, before communications sort of took over in America as one of the most important facets of American foreign policy and domestic policy, the Hollywood machine, the mainstream media, even revolutionary media, the satellites and the internet and all those pieces, before media really took over at the core of the system, engineers still, it seems in history, had a much larger role. Not that they don't now, but we'll get into what's different. So here's what ends up becoming different when I compare these two. Now we do have, instead of revolutionaries, we have these sort of nations that need to be preserved in their own minds, I suppose. And of course, one can't fault them for being stuck on that idea of self-preservation and self-perpetuation, right? That's what I think every Bitcoiner wants as well. We want to perpetuate Bitcoin. We want to make a better economy. And I think these guys, we can't mind read them, but one would imagine they do have good intentions, at least as far as wanting to affect a positive change. Maybe they want too much reward for it. Maybe they want too much credit for it. Maybe they have egos, like any human, right? We don't need to go over every one of their failings. But the difference here is that instead of engineers, and this is what I'm going to say about Bitcoin is purely psychological, but the engineers are behind it. But with the Bretton Woods system, with this system of governments issuing money, the argument here is that it's almost all persuasion and messaging and sales and marketing instead of engineers. And the Giacomo Zucco piece reminded me of another, when I had the idea for this compare and contrast, it wasn't just Giacomo Zucco's map. It was a fellow named Naval, who we all know. We all hear about Naval a lot. Naval Ravikant, maybe one of the smartest people in the world, has a lot of hot takes, gets some wrong, gets some right, but had a great one that triggered me into doing this, which was, he said, if you're doing, how did he write it? Let me get the exact quote. The exact quote was, you're doing sales because you failed at marketing. You're doing marketing because you failed at product. You're doing product because you failed at engineering. And now, I don't want to put engineers necessarily on a much higher pedestal than everyone else in all other industries. Hi, sweeties, just give me a second. I got to finish this. Yeah, go sit over there, sweeties. I'll be right there. So the point is not to put engineers above marketing people or salespeople. It's merely to say that there is an order of things or an order of talents or whatever. And if you're just in the sales and marketing piece to drive an entire economy, you're missing out on other talents. And you're also opening yourself up to a lot of trouble. And that's why you see whenever the sales and marketing piece from a Fed Reserve, if they don't speak with confidence, if they mix their words, if they say a wrong thing, it sets off the speculators, right? It sets off the speculators because in this system, it's either weapons, right, which they're helping to create using their connections to government and policy. And we see now in the war, I said I got one right with the drones and all that. I'll say about a weapon I got wrong. I saw that hypersonic weapon the Russians shot into Ukraine this week, and I said, whoa, that's along the same lines of what I'm saying. I can't imagine tanks are really going to make it anymore, or even a whole thing of airplanes. What if there's a bunch of these hypersonic weapons zipping around the world? What happens to military bases? Do you need one anymore? Is there a point? Are you just waiting for it to get destroyed? What else is there? So you can actually see that the weapons that are being built will change war entirely. And it looks like all the types of machines that were built in the last era of war to help keep the oil machine going, tanks, planes, ships, aren't quite as useful as they were in the last iteration. It looks like the drones and some of these really sophisticated rocket weapons. I'm not even sure if the hypersonic weapon is in the rocket category anymore. What is it? I don't even know. It just looked like a beam of light flying across the sky. It was pretty incredible. But the problem then becomes that when it becomes sales and marketing and tied to oil and tied to weapons, if anything else leaks out, if anything else isn't contained in this pile, it's got to be explained. It's got to be messaged. And that's why it's a constant barrage nowadays of psyops and messaging and all kinds of people trying to get your attention on this and on that. And when you look at the I in Bitcoin and how actually focused it's getting, with people thinking about consumption more, people thinking about all kinds of information asymmetry more, understanding markets more. Did anyone see that video of the girl today at the Public Banking Policy Institute? There's like a 10 to 12-year-old girl today at the Institute for Public Banking Institute speech. So first up, the Public Banking Institute is a think tank that is sort of aligned with what Bitcoiners are interested in. It's a very Austrian school type of institution. Now, these guys have been at that fight for a long time and haven't really been getting anywhere. Bitcoiners have made way more headway on these efforts than they have. And my argument here is that all these people working actually help focus the I in the middle. They help focus the Bitcoiner psychologically and in ways that we can't see. And that sort of incentive alignment contrasts heavily with the incentive misalignment we see more and more in the fiat world. So if you compare, for example, this unbelievable, now I think Bloomberg is starting to troll us as a matter of clickbait or whatever, but they have this absurd line that they're on these past couple of days about how to help people who are earning under 300,000 US dollars a year deal with inflation. I'm telling you, it's a troll. This is a psyop unto itself. Targeting the 300,000 group, all of it was for attention. They know what they're doing. Okay, if they are surprised that crypto Twitter is sitting there going, "Oh my God, look at these guys! What's going on in the world?" 1 second. Yeah. Then you're getting fooled. You're getting tricked, right? Be careful of these folks. They know what they're doing. They're putting the 300K number out there deliberately to get people to react. Because if they put it hurts people who make 50K most, it's just another news article. It doesn't matter. Nobody cares. No one pays attention. If they put the 300K, they got what they got today, which was every single person retweeting it. Every single person go, "Oh, look how stupid Bloomberg is." They're not stupid. They're not stupid. Okay, they're not stupid. They chose it on purpose. Even the idiotic information and advice they gave you is a part of a psyop. In a way, right? In a way, it's a part of it. It's not trying to get you to believe in America and sing the national anthem. It's not that kind of psyop. They just want their piece of the pie. They just want their name in the conversation today. And they got it. They got it, right? So they told us to not buy in bulk, right? It's crazy. Eat lentils instead of meat, right? Crazy stuff. And then if you take a look at this girl as well, who described things so accurately, but once again, she's only got a part of that focus, not so much what Bitcoiners are getting, although it's the same story. So when you compare those two, right, it starts to become clear, as far as I'm concerned anyway, that these guys here, this Bretton Woods 2 and 3 system, to keep the eye focused, to keep everyone rallying around that. The speculators can do their job. Everyone involved in the oil industry, the weapons industry, they're all going to keep trying to push people towards the middle. However, every time inflation erupts, you get Canada right now. Canada's got a problem because the Teamsters. So we hear about supply chains and fertilizer because of the Ukraine and Russia war currently. All right, well, Canada is one of the other big suppliers, potash. It's a big part of it. Now there's going to be terrible potash problems in Canada. They're all going on strike because the union is fighting with the collective bargaining entity. I guess it's the government to get it out. I'm not sure exactly who the parties are here, but I know that all of potash extraction and supply chains are going to be shut down because of collective bargaining. And that's related to inflation. The whole thing's related to inflation. So the more and more inflation gets out of control, the more and more they're going to have to use the messaging, the sales, and the marketing to keep people focused and to keep the eye centered, to keep people's attention in one place. But there's tons of misdirects. There's tons of people preying on your attention. And the argument here is that Bitcoin enjoys a tremendous advantage because of this, an advantage that's so great that once again, I think that we are in a situation where the hyper-Bitcoinized world is more and more likely. It's a much greater chance of happening than not now to be able to respond simply because these problems exist. All right. Karate lesson is happening today, so I've got a lot of kids waiting for karate. So I don't think I'm going to get too much more in, Chris.